My first recording of Sons and Lovers by T.H. Lawrence. This is Amreen from Readadayclub. This was actually my first T.H. Lawrence novel, and I think my second one's going to be Lady Chatterley's Lover, simply because Blake Morrison, the one who wrote the introduction to this book, mentions Lady Chatterley's Lover and a few other works by T.H. Lawrence, but especially Lady Chatterley's Lover in such an interesting manner you just want to read it. Okay, so I'm done with the introduction and part 1 of this book. Let me read to you what's at the back. The marriage of Gertrude and... Gertrude is referred to as Mrs. Morrel in the book. I did not know that her first name was Gertrude. The marriage of Gertrude and Walter Morrel has become a battleground. Repelled by her uneducated and sometimes violent husband, fastidious Gertrude devotes her life to her children, especially to her sons William and Paul, determined they will not follow their father into working down the coal mines. But conflict is inevitable when Paul seeks to escape his mother's suffocating grasp by entering into relationships with other women. Set in Lawrence's native Nottinghamshire, Sons and Lovers 1913 is a highly autobiographical and compelling portrayal of childhood, adolescence, and the clash of generations. So now I've read the introduction, and I even mentioned this on Instagram that it's one of the best introductions I've read so far, and that's because of Blake Morrison. Just on the second page of the introduction, he writes, where is it? For those new to his work, Sons and Lawrence is the place to start. Though it came after The White Peacock and The Trespasser, it reads like a first novel. This isn't only because it is life writing, recreating scenes from the author's own experience, nor is it because this story concerns childhood and adolescence and all that go with them, including fear, shame, self-consciousness, emotional hypersensitivity, sexual awakening, and the hubristic certainty that one is going to alter the face of the earth in some way. There's also the freshness and intensity with which Lawrence presents the Morrel family as if this was the only family in the world where the parents don't get on. The father drinks, the mother resents her sons' girlfriends, money is short, art and literature become a refuge, and so on. Okay, so what's happening here? We're following the life of Mrs. Morrel, the mother Gertrude, who's unhappy in her marriage because her husband turned out to be something she did not expect. And as the book wears on, you realize how different they are from one another. Walter Morrel, we gradually see, might have flourished in a different relationship. He too has lost out by marrying someone too much his opposite. She could not be content with the little he might be. She would have him the much that he ought to be. So in seeking to make him nobler than he could be, she destroyed him. Now, destroyed him, what does this mean? Walter Morrel, so far in the book, Walter Morrel, the only thing that he's done, at least in the first part of the book, is get really angry, yell at his wife and kids, go to the coal mine to work, have a drink after, get really drunk, and sort of repeat the whole thing. So he gets shut off from family life because his sons William and Paul, and they even have a daughter, Annie. So none of the kids want to share anything with him. So everything that happens in their lives is naturally discussed with the mother. And the mother too develops this intense bond with especially her sons. So because Oedipus Complex. So in a way, she turns to her sons when she turns away from her husband. Now, don't get me wrong, there's still some narrative sympathy you feel for Walter Morrel, who is loosely based on D.H. Lawrence's own father. He was too different from her. His nature was purely sensuous, and she strove to make him moral religious. She tried to force him to face things he could not endure it. It drove him out of his mind. So, when you read these passages, it sort of makes you feel that there's more to him than meets the eye. you know, the sort of stuff that's read between the lines. All right, okay, so as you can see, I have marked quite a bit in the first part of the book, and the first part actually ends on page 172, and I have used these to highlight certain themes that I noticed and that I liked. And the one that speaks volumes, sort of the elephant in the room, is the mother-son complex, which is marked in all sorts of blue here. So that is Freud's Oedipus complex. So in the first part of the book, you have the sons being born and being brought up very lovingly and protectively by the mother, as it should be. And then you enter this stage of this intimate relationship that the sons share with their mother. Already William was a lover to her. Now William is the eldest son, and this is when the second son, Paul, is born. So William tells the mother that Paul looks really nasty, but then this sort of behavior is so natural on the part of the firstborn child in any family, right? And then you have Annie, the daughter, who doesn't get, I mean, she doesn't get mentioned a lot in the book, but yeah, even she doesn't like the father, so she's very close to and fond of the mother, not in the same way the sons are, of course, but then yeah. And then you have a little bit of domestic abuse in between, and then the same thing, Walter Morrill trying to escape this life of his by drinking, and then you have the sons launching into life. So the first one is the eldest one, William. So when he's 19, he seems to be getting on very rapidly. He's studying hard and growing serious. The children were all rabid teetotalers. Then he gets a job in London at 120 a year. So he decides to leave home. He decides to leave his mother. It never occurred to him that she might be more hurt at his going away than glad of his success. Indeed, as the days drew near for his departure, her heart began to close and grow dreary with despair. She loved him so much, more than that, she hoped in him so much. Almost she lived by him. She liked to do things for him. She liked to put a cup for his tea and to iron his collars, of which he was so proud. It was a joy to her to have him proud of his collars. There was no laundry, so she used to rub away at them with her little convex iron till they shone from the sheer pressure of her arm. Now she would not do it for him. Now he was going away. She felt almost as if he were going as well out of her heart. He did not seem to leave her inhabited with himself. That was the grief and the pain to her. He took nearly all himself away. Okay, so William's out of the picture, and then we move on to the young life of Paul, the second son. Okay, and I've already read that because obviously it's in the first part, so I'm going to talk about that maybe later today. I do have time. Yes, maybe later today or tomorrow, let's see. We're back a little later today. Now we have the second son, Paul, launching into life. I found the character of Paul very interesting. From the beginning, even when he was a baby, the author has weaved into into Paul's being so much depth and subtlety. Even the mother's intimacy with Paul is more profound than it is with William. But her relationship with William is more passionate, I believe. And you can see that when William comes home to visit her on holidays, or when he talks or writes about his girlfriends to her, or even when he brings a girl home to her. I think her name is Lily. So this is when Paul, William and Lily go out for a walk one afternoon. Lily laughed. William opened his eyes and looked at her. In his gaze was a certain baffled look of misery and fierce appreciation. Her beauty seemed to hurt him, but often he got irritable. Now this hatred is explained later, because William thinks that Lily is not good enough for him because he's incapable of loving any other woman besides his mother. And even Mrs. Morel is not so fond of Lily. So you see how he manifests the same hatred for her, towards her. And even when he goes back to London, he wants to come home to his mother. So this goes on along with Paul's life. And after a point, after this, the book becomes a little dry in between. I've not marked much here. So this whole area, it becomes a bit dry. But then, who made me the queen of literature? Now that's a weird thing to say. Who is the queen of literature? The king is Shakespeare for sure. The queen, I suppose that would be Bronte. Okay, so anyway, I'm done with part 1 of the book. My thoughts so far, so good. You know what I like the most about D.H. Lawrence is that his writing is not too constricted, meaning his writing is so open, so organic, so natural, especially the narration bit. I remember that Blake Morrison mentions something about narration in the introduction, right? He says, sometimes the novel's voice is that of an omniscient narrator, but mostly it's narrated from within and can switch abruptly from one character's consciousness to another's. Yet the method works and is crucial to the enlargement of the novel's moral universe. Okay, and then there's this, in the introduction, there's this mention of feminism as well, although I didn't see much of that in the first part of the novel. So I'm looking forward to reading about feminism in the second part. And speaking of which, the second part begins at starts from page 173 and goes on till I think 473. Yes, so that's around 300. 300, yeah, that's around 300 pages, this thick. So yeah, so I'm going to read that, and I think that'll take me a few days, but for you it's going to be just a few seconds. Hi again, a few days and a pimple later. What is this, my third recording of Sons and Lovers by D.H. Lawrence? Yeah, I think it's my third recording. Okay, so the second part of the book begins with Paul's lady lovers. The first one is Miriam, who in her own twisted and complicated way wants Paul because she wants to take care of him like a mother. Where's that part? Then he was so ill, and she felt he would be weak. Then she would be stronger than he. Then she could love him. And if she could be mistress of him in his weakness, take care of him, if he could depend on her, if she could, as it were, have him in her arms, how she would love him. So Miriam and Paul share this very intimate relationship that is purely platonic. And the author has described this. I mean, I want to share so much about how brilliantly, how accurately, and almost mesmerizingly D.H. Lawrence has described Paul and Miriam, both as individuals in this relationship and together as a part of this shared intimacy, this shared connection. And Miriam lives her life with this sort of religious intensity. There's no looseness or abandon about her. Everything is gripped stiff with intensity, and her effort, overcharged, closes in on itself. So at such times, Paul, who's so used to his mother's reserve, and on such occasions, he's always thankful in his heart and soul that he has his mother, so sane and wholesome, unlike Miriam. But then there's something about about Miriam that just drew me in. There's something so mysterious, disciplined and self-fulfilling about her. She seems to know and truly understand Paul's loneliness, his brokenness, his aversion to her and women in general. And then you have Paul, who is heavily influenced and even suffocated by his mother, who thinks Miriam exults. She exults as she carries him off from me, Mrs. Morel cried in her heart. She's not like an ordinary woman who can leave me my share in him. She wants to absorb him. She wants to draw him out and absorb him till there is nothing left of him, even for himself. He will never be a man on his own feet. She will suck him up. So you see where the hatred for Miriam in Paul comes from. His deepest love and desire belonged to his mother. And I mean, he can't even stand the notion of hurting her and going off to another woman, let alone a woman she despises so much. Although Mrs. Morel hated every woman that both William and Paul were with. No, mother, I really don't love her. I talk to her, but I want to come home to you. He stroked his mother's hair and his mouth was on her throat. His mother kissed him a long, fervent kiss. My boy, she said, in a voice trembling with passionate love. Without knowing, he gently stroked her face. So at this time, Mr. Morel walks into the room and he tells his wife, Mrs. Morel, at your mischief again, he said venomously. Okay, so moving on. Despite Miriam's religious zeal, she decides to sleep with him, have sex with him, give herself to him because that's what he wants, and he wants that, all right, because there's enough mention of Miriam's daffodils being nearly out and the use of words such as the exact proportionate strength of his thrust when Miriam's swinging and he's pushing the swing higher. So you have that mental image of sex. So they eventually have sex because she thinks that if she doesn't, she might lose him. And even this, the author has described so well, so well. I mean, it's a shame on writers who cannot write like this, who can't and don't evoke such profound emotions at the right time. I mean, I understand that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but just listen to this. Miriam was very quiet, very calm. She only realized that she was doing something for him. He could hardly bear it. She lay to be sacrificed for him because she loved him so much, and he had to sacrifice her. For a second, he wished he was sexless or dead. Then he shut his eyes again to her, and his blood beat back again. And afterwards, he loved her to the last fiber of his being. He loved her, but he wanted somehow to cry. There was something he could not bear for her sake. And there remained afterwards always the sense of failure and of death. If he were really with her, he had to put aside himself and his desire. If he would have her, he had to put her aside. Okay, and then we move on to Clara, Mrs. Dawes. Now she's a bit older than Paul by 5 or 6 years, I think, but they share pretty much the same relationship, except that their relationship is more sensual, it's more heated, but that's only up until they have sex. And once again, then it's the same story between between Clara, Paul and his mother. Like, he doesn't want to be with her as well, he doesn't want to marry her too, and even though she's not like Miriam. And Clara brings to the story that feminist theme I spoke about at the beginning of this video, I think. Okay, so both of the female characters are quite fascinating to read into because they seemed to me to be quite confident in what they believed and felt. They seemed to be quite sure of themselves, and not so coincidentally, both in a way felt sorry for Paul. I mean, this guy, he tells his mother that he shall never meet the right woman as long as she's alive. So you see, there's so much agony, pain, desperation, suffocation in Paul, yet there's reconciliation and the will to keep going despite those feelings of emptiness, and he knows where those feelings come from. And you know, just reading this and being a part of this, I mean, it felt like D.H. Lawrence did the human race a huge favor by allowing us to become one with this book. Even though I read this book in a shitty mood, I must admit that it's one of the best books I have ever read. And I'm not going to share with you what happens in the end, but yeah, the story does have a sort of a climax, and the nature of that conclusion is very reflective of how of the symbolic, far-reaching and psychological theme of the whole story. So I finished the book, but I didn't read the appendix in the end, which is I think about 8 pages long. Okay, so I'll just read the last stanza. But the man who is the go-between from woman to production is the lover of that woman, and if that woman be his mother, then is he her lover in part only. He carries for her, but is never received unto her for his confirmation and renewal, and so wastes himself away in the flesh. The old son lover was Oedipus. The name of the new one is Legion. And if a son lover take a wife, then is she not his wife? She is only his bed. And his life will be torn in twain, and his wife in her despair shall hope for sons, that she may have her lover in her hour. D.H. Lawrence. Okay, so this book, I mean, if you're an avid reader or if you're into literature, it's a must read. Everything, the structure, the characters, the theories and the theme, everything about this book is once again something that I have never read before. So yeah, if you've read the book, let me know what you think, either on YouTube or on Instagram, and if you haven't, then please do, and after reading, maybe share your thoughts with me. Okay, so I think this is going to be my last video of 2021. So thank you so much for supporting us and for being there and for watching our videos, and I hope that you guys had a steady year, and I hope that you have an even steadier one next year. So wishing you a very, very happy new year, and thank you so much for watching.